75 to 80% of them man hours were still done in Charles City. And so we'd ship components out there, fully assembled, everything, semis, and after semis, they'd go out there, they had a little kind of an assembly line, shoot a little paint on it, throw a motor in it, and they were the manufacturing plant. That was the sad part. But that was kind of the start of the end of what Charles City was. But it was good experiences. I can't relate to. When I came online, I worked on a number of service calls on the G1355s, G955s, and then what evolved into the White Series, the 2150s. Did a lot of work on the 135s and 55s. But still farming out north of town with my brother and I, and that G1355 sitting outside here, that's the one I spent the winter but tearing my brains out. That was bought new by my dad in 1973, and we just kept it. And I just said I need to have that thing fixed up for the show. So that's my story. It's I don't want to bore you. I can't contribute near what these gentlemen can, but on behalf, I'm also very involved here in the Floyd County Museum on the board of directors, and we truly appreciate your people here. This is what keeps us going. We're one of 4 museums in the state of Iowa that's not a warehouse. We're fully staffed. We're open in the summertime 7 days a week. We're here to serve people like you. This is what generates revenue for us, is supplying you with build cards, or supplying you with shop manuals, supplying you with technical information. Mary Ann, our director, she's just a peach for us, but what you don't realize is that I talked to Mary Ann here at our museum annual meeting here this fall, and I said, just give me a feeling on how many times a day you get requests for information, whether it's phone calls, letters, emails, you name it, texts. And she says there it is, class. It averaged 10 to 12 times a day. And it isn't just, here's the answer. It may take an hour or so for us to research that stuff, but we're here, that's what we're here to do, and that's what helps fund our operations. So, again, thank you for that. So, but I'll sit down and shut up.
You have people have any questions you'd like answered? We'll try to help from what we know, if we know. No.
Say, Jim, I know I've talked to you about this in the past, and you want to just talk a little bit, the highlight when you had to go around and tell Minneapolis-Moline dealers that they were going to be axed, closed up. You had the honors of doing it.
Yeah, well, that's when we had to change. Excuse me for not standing up, but my legs aren't so good. We had to decide in one town, whether there's a Moline dealer and an Oliver dealer, we had to decide who was going to exist. And that wasn't a very nice job but we got through that, and we did that for about a year, and that was the basis for White Farm Equipment. Well, that lasted a year, and the powers to be decided, well, let's go back and have the Oliver line and the Moline line. and we tried that for a year, and they didn't like that, so that's when we put White Farm Equipment on the map in 1973. So that wasn't a very good time. But, maybe I can, as I said, I started in 1950. And at that time, I was with Minneapolis-Moline. And at that time, Minneapolis-Moline in farm equipment, that tractors and plows and combines and all that, was as big or bigger than John Deere in total sales. And in fact, I started out as a trainee by being on the order desk where dealers called in and wanted to do this. And of course, in the first 2 years, that was when things were still rationed. Man, and they'd beg for a plow, or they'd beg for a disc harrow, or they couldn't even ask for a tractor because they knew they'd never get it. And but that died down in 1953, and Frank Bennett was my boss. Do any of you here know Frank Bennett? Well, there's only one Frank Bennett in the world. And he could do more sales and ideas than anybody ever run into. So he decided to put me on the road as a sales trainee. And so I would go out and ride with a salesman and our territory managers, they called them in those days, and learn how you know, the sales department. And were in those days, the salesman that called on a dealer, he had to write their orders, and he had to collect the money for them. And then he would mail the money into the credit department. But so I went out on this, and I was sent out to South Dakota because Ed Lyon was the salesman out there, territory manager, and he had a heart attack or something, and he was unable to work for a while. So they put me out there, and I started calling on his dealers, and then Frank Bennett called me up one day and he said, "Hey, it's G4 order writing time." Oh, and he says, "What's that?" And he says, "Well, it's not just writing an order for a G4 combine. You try and get as many as you can, and you got to get 10% down from the dealer for the privilege of ordering a combine." Because Moline had, I don't know, in South Dakota and North Dakota and that area, they were the #1 combine people. Well, anyway, so I went up to Aberdeen, Herb Clinton, and I says, "Herb, it's time to order G4s." And he said, "Yeah, how many can I get?" "Well, let's start with 50. So that's fine. And then he gave me a check. He signed the orders, and he gave me a check for 10% down on 50 G4s. And that was I think that was about pretty close to $100,000. And in 1953, that was a lot of money. So then, boy, I felt pretty good. So I go down to Redfield, Spink County Implement. And I said, "It's G4 time." And he says, "Good, how many can I get?" "Well, we'll try 50. And we went through the same thing. We wrote orders for 50 combines and got down payment 10% on that. And I said, "Well, let's see, who can I go?" Oh, Clinton, Redfield, Watertown. So the same story there. He ordered 50 G4s and 10% down on the 50. Man, I felt pretty good. Here I had 100 orders for 150 combines, and it was 10% down for that. And this was on a Friday, so I was living still in Hopkins, so I went out to work on Monday. And Frank, I think we always opened at 8 o'clock, but Frank liked to sleep in a little better. So I was getting pretty nervous, and Frank showed up about 9 o'clock, and he said, "Hey, come in here, and what went on?" So I said, "Well, I had a pretty good week, and Ed Lyon is getting better. Will be able to come back to work maybe in another month. But he says, I have a little something for you." And I had this pile of 150 G4 orders and checks, and I put it on Frank's desk, and I says, "This is all I could do last week." He was rather surprised, and then the next day he called me in, and he says, "Hey, I got something for you." "What's that?" And he took me outside, and I had a brand new Chevrolet 4-door sedan as my car. So, but then those combines went out, and the dealers could have sold more if we could have built more. And it was a lot of that with Minneapolis-Moline in the 50s. Well, after the war, the first 5 years, you could sell anything.
Yeah.
And but there was a little competition come on. Yes.
So did you get up into North Dakota at all then?
Oh yeah, I had. Yes.
How big an area did you have then?
Well, Ed Lyon was what Blockman we called him in those days, and he probably had half of North Dakota, because we had another territory man in Minot, and we had another one in what's the big city way out on the west end of North Dakota.
Williston?
Williston, yeah, that's right. And
I'm from that area, so that's all.
yeah. And, well, I would guess that, well, they took a survey, and I think it was in 55 or 56. And in North and South Dakota and Montana, Minneapolis-Moline had something like 60% of all the farm equipment business. So, too bad it went to hell.
Where was that G4 combine actually built?
Hopkins.
In Hopkins?
Yeah, Hopkins.
That was a pull-type combine with a Z engine.
Yeah. 12-foot or short auger and end for pickup work.
And without live PTO in the tractors at that time, the engine may give you the same effect. But their farms were smaller. They were real popular in the wheat areas,
Yeah.
Canada, Dakotas, Montana.
They could have sold more, but they didn't have the capacity to build that anymore than, because every one they could build, the dealers sold. And there was no carryover.
They're also, that was Korean wartime,
Yeah.
and the government had restrictions on how much steel a company could get. And basically, they said whatever you were using in 51 or 2, that was going to be the max steel you'd get. And you had to decide how you allocated that among the different machines.
And this was also the time that the self-propelled combine was coming into view. And you gotta hand it to Massey. They somewhere or another sold, and like you said, steel was rationed. And Massey came up with the program to, what did they call that?
Harvest
Harvest Brigade, and they got all the steel they wanted. And they built the self-propelled, and they had a pretty decent self-propelled combine for 1950, I mean. And that's how they got to be number one for quite a while in the self-propelled combine market. And Moline really never got into it because they didn't, well, they wouldn't, why should we build a self-propelled combine when we can't even make enough of the pull types? Well, all of a sudden, that self-propelled combine took over the market, and we were still trying to sell pull-type combines, and it didn't work out so good, and we never really got into the self-propelled market.
Had the company even recovered from the Second World War? I mean, there was so much demand for everything.
Yeah.
By 1950, it still was some catch-up time, wasn't it?
But by about 1953, 54, it started to get competitive.
Sure.
And John Deere wasn't in the tractor market. They still were selling or making two-cylinder things. Things, as I call them. And,
Talk about the company car. I heard a story about it.
Pardon?
The company car, getting the company car from Minneapolis to drive. And there was a manager in Texas that wanted one with air conditioning. And the manager said, "You don't need that." But he took him on a drive one day, and they got him one.
My first company car was a two-door Chevrolet business coupe. It was a steering wheel and a trunk.
I got a question about the plant out here at Charles City. At its peak, how many Olivers were they producing? And what model was the most popular? The 88 or the 1850 or?
The highest production tractor was the 1850. and I think that was just, is Dwayne here? He'd know exactly, but it's just under 20,000 total units they made of the 1850. Then the 770 Oliver was the next one down, and then the 1650, 1655s, they were, if you combine those two, that would be the highest production by far, but they, you know, and there wasn't that much difference in those two tractors.
So that, the card files downstairs that I got to look, that's each individual build card?
Every,
There is a lot of cards in there.
that's the birth certificate of every tractor. And what we're trying to do is trying to get they had them right up to the plant till the assembly line moved. And we're trying to get the white farm ones too, because we see that as the next era of people interested in collecting, and AGCO's holding on to them very tightly. We've been in some debates with AGCO. In fact, they showed, and I sure don't want to take away from the Moline thing here, but they showed up here at the museum, so I called him the AGCO Nazis, about 3-4 years ago, and said, you know, all this stuff you guys got, that's not yours. That's ours, and we want it back now. And very fortunate for us, our head of personnel, his name was John Culbertson, and he was an attorney. And he had made an arrangements with the bankruptcy court judge, and we had certification, we had a letter. And so we kind of put this guy off, said, whoa, we gotta think about this. We're just not gonna give this stuff up. So we got a hold of John. John says, here, give him this letter. So next time they flew up, they took about a month or so, here and they come to Charles City. When are we gonna make this agreement to get all this stuff shipped out down to Duluth, Georgia? We threw that letter out on the table and said, that is not your stuff. Here's what the bankruptcy court judge said. It's Floyd County Museums. They packed their bags and left. So, but I'm a little off track here, but the highest production was in those. And it was, what is it that Mike Pearson said that he was a, I don't know if you guys watch Market to Market on Iowa Public TV once in a while, or maybe not many, but he used to be the host on there. His dad's name was Mark Pearson, who passed away. But he gives a speech, now he goes around and gives them talks on how agriculture is changing and everything. And he has a specification, and you guys could probably back it up. There were more tractors built from 1950 to 1960 than have ever been built since. You know, everybody had 160 acres, had a couple of, you know, a Z or an 88 or something, or an M.
There's supposed to be a year in there that Harvester built 176,000 tractors
Yeah.
in 1 year company-wide, you know. It's like one of the last model plain M's, I think, is where it falls, like around 52 or something. It was incredible, you know. They were,
Ford sold over 200,000 tractors there, about 52. And Ferguson wasn't too far behind when the small tractors were popular. The 60s, I've just looked at numbers for the 60s, and I think it was 66 was the highest number in the 60s of production, was a little better than 22,000 in 1 year. But all the mid-60s and 1650 was particularly strong there. Over time, the 1850 became the big seller. But the 1650s held in there pretty decent for a long time.
The end of the 50s there too, people started having more than one tractor on the farm.
Yes.
And I don't want to steal the thunder, because there's going to be, I don't know if you noticed, I'm going to be the speaker at the banquet. I hope I don't bore you guys too much. But I'm having some questions out there, and one of the questions is, what's the highest production tractor the Minneapolis-Moline made? And I'm not going to give it away because we're giving away presents here. You know, there was a model that Minneapolis-Moline sold a lot of.
The U was really the most popular as far as numbers go, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Before we leave the G4 combines, they had to adjust the platform height, you turned that spoke steering wheel. Did that tilt the whole combine, or did it just raise the header?
That tilted the whole combine.
Huh? No, it pivoted the whole combine, didn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
pivoted the whole
that's what I
combine.
think. My dad used to have one, that's what I thought.
Later, they had an option to put the pneumatic cylinder on,
Okay.
so you could hydraulically control it. But they tilled the whole combine, and then the shoe had an adjustment.
I was gonna say, what happened? Yeah,
If you got too steep, you could adjust the shoe up and down to keep it level when you were in cutting position.
Okay, so-
But a lot of the wheat was cut pretty high off the ground.
Yeah.
So, and they also had, on the outboard side, one of the wheels was adjustable up and down also. Not a quick change, but you could,
So
set it for the
transport-
type of crop you were typically in.
In transport going on the road, then, you could have your pickup this high off the ground, and the straw spreader was this high off the ground, if you wanted to.
Yeah,
I'd like to ask a question you want back to G4s, when the plant went into production, they built nothing but G4s night and day until they got whatever they could do. And as I remember, it was 2 G4s to a rail car. And I had pictures of, like the 50 that went to Watertown. They sent all 50, so that'd been 25 carloads, and that's quite a picture. And when they got, but I can't find those pictures, or I don't know how they disappeared. Has anybody got a picture of shipping all those G4s and getting 50 in a row, 25 carloads? There was pictures,
I've seen a picture, but I can't remember.
I've
but
seen
if
it.
anybody runs across a picture, a carload of G4s, turn them into here, because that'd be interesting that'd be something like pulling into Huron, South Dakota with 50 combines. But that's the way it was for 2-3 years.
What did a G4 cost back then? Look at that.
I could get my book. I think it was what, $3,500 about?
no, I was thinking somewhere around 4 or so, but I don't know.
Yeah.
They were not, in our part where I grew up, we didn't have those bigger
Well, a
combines.
69 combine was less than $2,000.
Yeah, the whole type. And in the early 50s, while they were building all these G4s, I think, wasn't the 69, they built, what, like 17,000 or 15,000 for a couple years there in the early 50s, besides a bunch of G4s.
Yeah.
So they were building a lot of combines.
Well, I think they would have, they turn the line and build all G4s.
Right.
And then, or 69s or whatever it was.
But
I
the
mean,
same year, they
Yeah.
built a lot of combines.
And I think
Surprising number.
they worked, well, maybe, didn't they work 24 hours a day, the plants?
Yeah, that was pretty common.
Why did Minneapolis-Moline seem to have such a stronger LP gas tractor segment?
Well, I think they had 98% of the LP gas market. And,
They were the
Pioneered
first.
it, you know.
First to put out an LP tractor. And they were one of the few that engineered it with higher compression ratio and did it right. And most of the other companies they had a few people wanting them. They never put much effort. They took a gas tractor, put a big tank on it, and they didn't optimize it for LP fuel. And so